If you've made the money on your own, spend it however the you want to spend it and enjoy it. If I can turn 150 grand into almost $1.5 million profit, this is the business I need to be in. I bought a $50 million property during, I didn't even bother going and seeing Google Maps and Google Earth and demographics did all the homework I needed. Keep taxing the rich, keep taxing the rich. If you keep taxing people that are pushing the economy and growing the economy, what happens? The economy doesn't grow.
When you say planning ahead, what do you think the future is going to look like, and what are you planning for? Hey, what's up, guys? John here. I'm sitting here with Robert Rivani. He just sold a house in Beverly Hills, a Harry Potter inspired house in Beverly Hills for just under 20 million bucks. Did almost $600 million in deals in South Florida, raised zero capital. And we're going to learn, a lot about, getting started in business, real estate investing, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. The big trends that are happening, a lot of the people, a lot of the capital, a lot of the opportunities are flooding from places like New York, San Francisco, and LA to places like South Florida. So Robert, welcome, man. How are you?
Thank you for having me on. I'm good.
You got it. So when you came here, South Florida?
About a year ago.
And why'd you originally leave California? I know a lot of people are leaving for different reasons, but.
Yeah, I think it was a mix of the crime, the not being able to see the city turn back at all. The mayor that I wanted Caruso to win lost. Like I said, crime is rampant. My friends' homes have gotten broken into after they've gone to dinners or followed home. The taxes continue to get higher and higher and higher. And I'm all for paying taxes if you get something in return. And what you're seeing in California, especially in LA, you weren't getting anything in return. You're just getting robbery after robbery, crime after crime. And it was getting to the point where it was like, enough is enough. COVID also played a big role in that too. We felt like we were handcuffed and choked out by the government. Like I couldn't even go to a restaurant. I always tell my friends this funny story. We would be at a restaurant, I'm eating dinner, I'm having my main meal, and then between dinner and dessert, I have to wear a mask. But if I'm eating, I don't have to wear a mask.
Yeah, it was nuts.
All these stupid rules are just like, I feel like I'm in a communist country, and versus all these people in South Florida were living their life, COVID didn't exist, business as usual, people are going to work, and I said I had enough of that communist kind of feeling for my life and for my future family.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, it seems like that push is even getting more extreme, but it's more of like death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
Like they're like, oh yeah, all these extreme measures, they'll pull back slightly. Then they're going to push more extreme measures. Like the ULA tax. You mentioned you paid like $1 million in tax.
I just paid $1 million to the government for no reason, to sell my own home.
Yeah.
Again, they keep coming up with these ideas that are like, and now they're trying to take that money that was originally supposed to be for something else to help pay back renters who got away for not having to pay rent for 2 years. Whether they could afford it or not does not matter. They just didn't pay for 2 years since the beginning of COVID. So again, all these socialist kind of policies don't really fit for me anymore.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. It was like 5.5% tax on all sales north of 10 million bucks.
Yeah.
Like you think about how crazy that is. When you buy into a neighborhood, you buy into a specific property, you're buying into it based on a certain set of expectations. You're buying the property, you're buying the government, you're buying a lot of the schools. But when you're buying something and then ultimately they change the rules after you made the purchase, like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to pay me 5.5% tax because we're telling you to pay 5.5% tax and you have another way out. Like that's not just theft, but that's unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, the craziest thing about it that for me is it's not even on profit.
Yeah.
So if you bought that same house for $20 million and you sold it for $20 million, by the time you pay that tax, by the time you pay your brokerage fees, all the other costs that go into it, you're out 10 to 12% off the top.
Yeah.
So it's what you're disincentivizing people from wanting to buy homes. Why would you buy a home? You might just go rent.
Yeah.
You have no, because even if the appreciation does go up, you're still paying 5.5%. And what does an average home appreciate a year? 3%, 4%? Yeah. So you're 3 years before you make $1. And now with rising interest rates, why the hell would you buy a home? It makes no sense. And that's why you're seeing, the housing market in LA specifically, I think the activity year over year, when Measure ULA got passed now, is 80% reduction in those types of homes selling above $10 million. And now they're seeing that what they're doing is not a plan, is not a solution whatsoever. And you're stopping the home flippers, which are building a lot of these homes. Because then they're like, hey, there's no profit margin in this. Why am I going to go and spend all this time, money, and effort with high interest rates to flip homes and develop new products? So I think that's a problem.
Yeah, so it's going to essentially take money out of the pockets of not just realtors, not just construction, whether it be vendors and tile, like plumbing, anything. All these people are getting pulled away from the industry.
I mean, that's the crazy thing that I always hear when people are like, oh, keep taxing the rich, keep taxing the rich. Like, doofus, if you keep taxing people that are pushing the economy and growing the economy, a real estate developer, for example, there's title officers, escrow agents, leasing brokers, sales agents. When you get a new house, you get landscapers, you get porters, you get so many people that you need to hire for things. And if you put a complete halt to things and homes are sitting empty and not trading, what happens? The economy doesn't grow. But they don't give a shit about that. They just think these backward ass social politics are going to work, and they're failing, and that's why everyone's leaving.
Yeah. I mean, you heard about the new wildlife ordinance in LA?
No.
It's between Sunset and Mulholland,
Okay.
where your property would have to now pass a wildlife ordinance because of this new green energy type of this green plan that they have, to where if you have a lot, let's say in the Hollywood Hills, it's 8,500 square feet. Before, you might be able to build 4,200 square feet, right, on that lot.
Right.
But now with the new ordinance, it would be about 2,000 square feet.
You're fucking kidding me.
Yeah. So all these people just got their
my
hillside properties and all these properties, greatly punished. There's like all these protests and stuff.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised anymore with the crazy things that they try to pass. It's pathetic. And that's why people either need to step up and say, we're out of here, and let them suffer, like you're seeing San Francisco suffer tremendously.
Yeah.
And at some point, they're going to realize it again. But unfortunately, right now, they're just not paying attention.
Today's video is sponsored by Great Credit Fast. Do you want to invest in real estate or possibly Airbnb? Maybe you want to start and grow a company or a business or possibly get debt free. With great credit, you're able to achieve all of this and much, much more. The last thing that you want to do is borrow money from a credit card company paying 25 or 27% interest, because when you look at the real numbers and you look at what's actually happening in the economy, that's the worst strategy, and it's almost a guaranteed failure. Take a look at this. So if you're borrowing $10,000 at a 27% interest rate, paying $250 a month, it's going to take about 9 years to pay this off, and about $16,000 in wasted resources paid to one of these credit card companies. However, with great credit, you're able to do a balance transfer in most cases and get debt free for 0% interest and pay this off in a fraction of the time. In 2008, banks started tightening up lending restrictions, and that's exactly what they are doing now. They're getting ready to tighten up lending restrictions, meaning that if you have that low credit score, 400, 500, 600 credit score, if you're in that even low 700s, it becomes much more challenging to get access to money. But if you look at Blackstone, for example, Blackstone, they are using their credit and their relationships to raise money. They've just raised $30 billion to invest in single family rentals. If you want to invest in real estate, you want to really grow in scale during the greatest wealth transfer of all time, you're going to need great credit to do it. We would love to give you a free consultation to see how we can help you at greatcreditfast.com. That's greatcreditfast.com, or give us a call at 561-430-5900. Now back to the show.
Do you think they want it to, crater? Do you think that that's actually what they're hoping for? They want that money to flow out so that way, they're going to raise taxes, sure, but they want real, to me at least, it seems to say they want real dependence. And the only way in which they can get real dependence is by crippling the economy, taxing the hell out of people, and then being able to force.
I mean, I'm sure there's something much bigger out there than we, the average citizen, see, because I can't imagine any politician or any human being, for that fact, walk around the streets of San Francisco and be like, we're doing something good here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how anyone can say that things are going well, or look in the face of people and say, oh, this is a positive thing for us. Like, even today, one of my friends was joking with me. He's like, Rob, look, California's getting better and better. And it's a video of a group of kids going to Bloomingdale's and robbing Bloomingdale's in Century City blind. Just midday, something like $200,000 worth of stuff. Security guard just watches them.
It's absolutely nuts.
It's like, what, any other country, go Middle East, go somewhere, you're getting your hands cut off. Like, that shit's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But here it's like, oh, rob us up to $1,000. Go ahead, do whatever you want. It's reparations. It's this. Like, give me a fucking break.
Yeah, it's an absolute joke.
It's a joke.
Like, they are pushing that reparations thing really hard in San Francisco and California. I'm like, it's going to be very interesting to watch places like New York and California. Even like that in New York, they just, I was talking about it yesterday. They have this new migrant situation where there's like 100,000 migrants
really
that are getting
bad.
evicted.
Yeah.
But they're evicting them, and they're not legal allowed to work, and they're not giving them money.
Well, that's the policy they want. They're just letting everybody through the border with no plan. And then you see the beginning, like, oh yeah, we want people to come here. Let's support them. And as soon as they get there and they see the issues with it, like, no, we can't handle this anymore. We're done with this. And you're seeing the countries that are really leaning hard left. Sorry, the cities, New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, shit is not working. Wake up.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're not.
Yeah. I mean, some of the reasons why, my wife and I brought my family here, just probably like you. Like, you want a safe area, an area in which you can do business, favorable taxes, a good environment. Florida has a lot going for it now.
Yeah.
And 3-4 years ago, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there's no way in hell I'd want to move to Florida. There was just no way.
For sure.
But now looking at it, it's like, there's nowhere I'd rather be.
Yeah, that's because all the different things came together. Nicer hotels, newer buildings, newer towers for residential, newer master plan communities, newer hospitality. Miami for a long time was just a vacationer's town. You come here for a week, have a great vacation, but it wasn't truly a city. And now you're seeing Brickell, South Beach, they're on fire. Coral Gables, up by Boca Raton, all that stuff. It's just on fire because of all the new expansion and development, and everything's pretty and nice. And again, no state income tax. You're not paying a state income tax, and you still get to live in a beautiful place with great water, great views. I love it here. Did
you think that you were going to essentially like build your empire that you have here in South Florida in LA? Was that your original goal?
You know, I had invested in South Florida 3-4 years before, and I loved it. And I loved it out here, but I was primarily doing shopping centers at the time, so I was all over the country. So I kind of went where the deal went, so I really didn't care about where my location was. But one thing that I saw during COVID that was a really big shocker to me was two things. One was my wife was always big on going to the grocery store, was always big on going to big box retail stores because she just old school like that and liked it. And then when COVID hit, she's like, well, I'm going to do Instacart, or I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, you are not going to go to grocery. And she's a dietitian. So for her not to go to a grocery store was a big shock to me. So I'm like, okay, well, if you can Instacart that, big box dependency is going to change. So then I was like, okay, maybe it's time to pivot from shopping centers. And something that I saw that everybody was doing during COVID was the moment that that you could go out and have fun and you were allowed to in LA, everyone would be at a bar or a restaurant. Like, she's like, oh, I've been trapped at house, I want to get out. And in South Florida, it was on fire. People were dying to go out. We're going to clubs. Club space was open. Restaurants were open. Clubs were open. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe there's something here. There's never been, at least when I know, a landlord that focused on hospitality, that brought these big restaurants from LA or from overseas into locations and would buy this real estate and turn that in. So I ended up buying, I think, over $100 million of restaurant properties, I guess you could say, where we filled in brands like Delilah, Gecko with David Grutman and Bad Bunny, Philippe Chow, Catch, all these big name brands that slowly but surely, one after the other, just started falling in together. And I created a real estate portfolio of just hospitality restaurants worth over $200 million. And it just happened by chance. It was just one thing that just led to another. And then you saw everyone like, South Florida is a place to be. And then most people follow the restaurants. And I think that's what drives a big part of the economy is restaurants, right? Like if you're with your boys and you want to go on a bachelor party, you're gonna be like, all right, where has the best clubs, best restaurant scene, best hotels, best vibe? And Miami Beach is that. And now you're seeing all these big restaurants coming down. You're like, I'm not gonna go to Vegas anymore. I'm not gonna go to New York. I'm just gonna go to Miami. And that's when the restaurant scene here just blew up.
So what was the property in California that like I've seen videos of it. A lot of people talk about it. It was like a Harry Potter style property.
Castle Rivani.
Yeah. And it was like, it was like really interesting. So what was the purpose behind that? Was it like, that was going to be a place like a bi-coastal spot or?
No. So I bought that pre-COVID. So I bought that house like 6 or 7 months before COVID. So I was still going to live in LA. I was going to maybe just buy a condo, which I bought one here in Miami. Now that was going to be my second place, but LA was going to be my primary place. It was a dream come true kids fantasy house that I loved Harry Potter. I love Game of Thrones, and this house was very similar to that aesthetic already, and then just completely decked it out. And I love that house. But it got to a point where during COVID, it was like, enough is enough. Like, this is madness. And it was probably the most painful thing for me to do, to let go of my dream home, but I did it for the betterment of my future and my family's future.
Yeah. So, but what about Harry Potter do you love so much? Like, a lot of people love, movies. A lot of people like, they click with certain like genres and certain things,
right?
But not to an extent to where they're like, I'm gonna go spend, like I'm gonna put $20 million into Harry Potter.
Yeah, growing up, I didn't have the greatest of childhoods. I resonated a lot with Harry Potter and the kind of house they lived in. I grew up in like a 1,500 square foot house with 5 people, and I didn't have the greatest of financial upbringings. And for me, it was like this fantasy land of living out of your normal day-to-day life was just really exciting for me. And I showed the movie to my wife, and she became a Harry Potter nuthead too. And she's like, I love it. And why not build a house that's kind of like the whole house wasn't Harry Potter. There were certain rooms that were, and there was other rooms. Like each room had a different decor and a different theme. But it brought me the inner child, I guess you can say, became happy with it. So that's why I decided to do it.
So was it like, was that the initial intent? Like a lot of people, it's kind of like, I would imagine, you ever see someone that get one tattoo and before you know it, they have 20, then both sleeves and their back and everything. Right. Was it kind of like that with the house where you're like, I love the house. I'm going to have, a chair. I'm going to have this, and that's going to be it. And then before you know it, there's like more and more and more collectible pieces. And before you know it, the whole house or a lot of the house was like that.
For sure. I mean, when we first bought the house is 15,000 square feet. So it's huge. And it looked really empty. I brought some furniture, and like, this house is really empty because it wasn't furnished when we bought it. And I'm like, that little corner there looks like a great Game of Thrones chair. I'm like, yeah, but if you have the Game of Thrones chair, then you need the portrait above it. If you have the portrait above it, then you need this. So yeah, it slowly progressed to that. But it's like, I have this big notion in life that you only live one time. if you've made the money on your own, spend it however the you want to spend it and enjoy it. And that for me and for my wife during is like, we had 12 months to go furniture shopping. We were on Cherish or Etsy online getting antiques. And it was like a fun hobby that, like you said, one thing just turned into the next and just became our dream home.
So how did you get to the point to where you could buy the house?
Financially?
Like, what was like your roadmap? Was it like, what was your first bit of success, and how did it kind of like spiral to that?
The first bit of success ever was a shoe company that I had that I was making 10, 15 grand a month selling Jordan shoes, staying out on streets overnight and buying these limited edition shoes and flipping them on eBay and all that stuff. But the real money came during real estate. I bought, little small strip centers, 5,000 square foot properties, did the, typical parking lot redo, facelift on the exterior facade, go knock on doors to obtain tenants and flip them and turn a profit. I don't believe, which is pretty much the standard norm now, of buying a property, holding it, refining and selling it. I mean, and cash flowing it till kingdom come. I don't believe in that. I believe in equity multiplying at all times and buying and selling and 1031 exchanging so your equity can always grow. By the same token is the same way I felt about my residential purchase for the first time. That was the first residential asset I'd ever owned, that castle.
So where were you living before that?
In a condo. I always believed in renting because for me, if I didn't think something was my dream home, I thought it was a stupid investment. Because, for example, if I bought a condo that was $8 million, I'd have to tie up $2-3 million of equity. Well, in my head, I'm like, well, if I have to tie up $3 million of equity, that same $3 million could have bought me a $10 million property. And if I'm making 50% on my properties every 2 years or 3 years, that condo just cost me $5 million. Why not just rent it for 15, 20 grand a month?
Yeah.
So I always believed in my money working for me. I never believed in just sit tight, refi cash flow, and the real estate income that you make will pay for your whole life. I think that's absolute nonsense. And why I think that is I sat there for a while when I was listening to some people's podcasts and they're explaining this refi method to me. I'm like, well, if an average property makes you 5% per year, 6% if it's stable, you need to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in assets in order to afford a very rich fuck you kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that for me just never made sense. Maybe if you have real estate for 30, 40 years, then once you've made $1 billion in equity, then you put in stable stuff, fine. But if you're just growing out and trying to make your first couple $1 million, I think it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, a lot of people saw this massive rent boom over the last couple of years, whether it be, I would imagine also in your industry as well. But like in multifamily specifically, like South Florida, you're seeing rents 30, 40%. It was absolutely insane. And so like a lot of people bought these properties that, these properties based on, a 4 cap, and they'd buy them after a huge rent pump, record low interest rates, and they'd lock in like a 3 or 5 or 7 year ARM, and then they'd have to refi very soon.
What happens at the 3 years?
They're going to get crushed.
That's the biggest problem that you're starting to see with a lot of these real estate gurus that are like, I'm buying 500 units at a time, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, great, but you bought it at a 3.5, 4 cap, your rate's fixed for 5 years. And if your rents don't spike to double or triple, you're in serious trouble.
And insurance and taxes are going up.
I mean, I just, on 3 of my properties here in South Florida, even though I love South Florida, my insurance tripled.
Yep.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Some of them even up 4 times on some properties. And it's painful. And property tax is something that a lot of people here in South Florida don't realize compared to California. It's almost 50 to 60% more in property tax than you would be in California. So you have to weigh those things out. And I think a lot of people come blindly to an investment like, well, it's South Florida, it's a great market, it's going to boom, rents are going to go up. But at what point did you get in, right? Like if you got in 3 years ago, 2 years ago, sure. But now if you're like, I'm going to keep pushing that envelope, and you're seeing most of multifamily deals and office deals have gone silent. Like no one's buying or selling these deals anymore because it's just tough. It doesn't make financial sense with rates being in the 7s and 8s.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna have a very interesting dysfunctional next 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, like the last couple of years, they're just all gurus talking about house flipping and burrs and basically refining and pulling cash out. And a lot of these people, I think, are going to get smacked, and they're going to give the keys back to the bank.
100%. You're already starting to see it happen. You're already starting to see it slowly but surely happen. But yeah, it has to. I mean, people over leverage, and that's another thing I always try to tell people. This notion that they push on investors to over leverage yourself to the brink so you can get all your cash out. It's like if the market goes down 10, 20%, you're handing the keys back. How does that make any sense?
Yep.
I mean, you're just over leveraging your portfolio. So if a couple of your tenants move out or you have to refi, you're handing the keys back.
Yeah.
That makes no business sense to me whatsoever. And you see very few of these guys, and it's funny. I mean, some are good guys. Some guys, I don't want to call out all these gurus. Some are doing it really well. But some of these guys, you're seeing it's not even their money. and they don't give a shit. They're raising the money, they're making their fees, and they're touting their business model, and they're making fees for themselves, but they're not actually making equity. And when you look at, the gurus out there, how many of them have significantly high net worths?
Not many.
Not many. And there's a reason for that, because they're in the fee-based, profit-mongering off individuals that don't know any better kind of business, and not really in the real estate equity multiplying business.
Yeah, I was talking about this like 18 months ago. I'm saying, if you're buying a deal for $10 million and you put $3 million down and you get $7 million in debt on the property, and rents drop 10% and taxes and insurance go up, and then you have to refi. If the building is worth $7, they're not just going to give you another $7 million. They're going to want you to come to the table with $2.5 million to be able to get a refi.
Yeah.
And so who the hell is, if you're going to raise money, and they've already put money into a deal, who's going to put another $2.5 million into a deal that's upside down?
All right.
Not many people.
You're handing the keys back to the bank.
Yeah. And so I agree with you. I think that you're going to see people make ungodly amounts of money the next couple of years that are able to, capitalize on that pain.
For sure. And the biggest thing, because I've kind of slowed down the past 6 months, and people are like, well, what's going on, Rob? Why are you slowing down? What was there an issue? I'm like, yeah, there's an issue. But like, well, how are you going to make money? And I tell them, I'm like, look, the smartest people that make the most amount of money during impact situations like this is being able to have free liquid cash on the sides. So for me, when I have significantly high equity, I never leverage more than 50% at a time on a portfolio. I'm very, very rarely ever over leverage. I have the ability now to go on all the properties that have this significant amount of equity and get lines of credit. So anytime a deal comes, guess what? I just pull out the cash, buy it, refi it back out, and then put the money back into the prior deal. So for me, planning ahead and being proactive instead of reactive is a game changer when it comes to real estate investing.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to be, when you say planning ahead, what do you think the future is going to look like, and what are you planning for?
That is the billion-dollar question. I mean, every asset class has its own different beast. For me, at least for office and shopping centers, or that more commercial side, I think there's going to be pain. Office is getting slaughtered right now. And unless someone has a magic touch to understand how office can be transformed into something new and different, I think office continues to go down unless you can convert it to multifamily, but that's really expensive, or construction costs right now. For shopping centers, things are going to get a little nutty again. What's crazy is, coming out of COVID, everyone thought the death of shopping centers, the death of malls and everything. But sales for big boxes actually went up. People didn't enjoy shopping online as much as everyone thought they would. So I think as long as you're buying in really good locations, like I always say, if you can buy a B property in an A location, put some money, put some lipstick on it, and turn it into an A property, focus on those good markets. I hate the investments that, you're like, oh, well, it used to be worth 20 million. I'm buying it for 5 million. I know I could turn it around. Like, that's scary to me.
Yeah.
Find out properties that have very good fundamentals, that you can plan, that you actually have a plan of how you can turn it around, not just buying it for 20 and buying it for 5 because it used to be 20 without a proper plan, and have cash and have reserves. So every time I buy a deal, I set up 2-year interest reserves, and some of the costs. I'll like property taxes, I'll put away in reserve, because I never know what my cash flow situation is going to be on these redevelopment properties. So just in case some tenants go out, like you mentioned before, or taxes go up or something, you have money set aside. So for that rainy day, you're not in trouble. So keep your leverage down, have the reserves, and have a proper game plan. That's like my 1, 2, 3 punch for redeveloping a property.
So when you say a proper game plan, like what would it look like? Like, let's say, for example, there's a property across the street. It's in an A location. It's a B property. You want to do exactly what you said. And
Right.
let's say, for example, there's an anchor tenant in there that, was very attractive, and that lease is expired and they're not going to renew. But, there's a couple small locations. Before you even buy that property, before you put it under contract, do you already have an idea of who that tenant's going to be and kind of
Yes,
like
I'll
what
give you
you're
a
gonna
real
do?
world example. I bought a shopping center up in New Jersey. It's a $50 million shopping center. And the property was just beat to crap. Parking lot was completely ravaged. The facade looked like shit. It just wasn't a very good looking property, but it had tenants like Walmart, Lowe's, TJ Maxx, had some good brands, McDonald's, all the big brands. This is things like 350,000 square feet. It's a monster. And I asked myself, I had a couple vacancies. It was a former Toys R Us, and there was Bed Bath & Beyond that was coming on a short-term lease. So I told myself, okay, going into this property, I need to do lipstick. I ended up spending millions and millions of dollars remodeling the facade, remodeling the parking lot, talking to tenants, seeing how their business is doing, had gross sales reports, and the sales weren't bad. The tenants were actually doing decent. And I told myself, well, if this property is doing decent under the conditions of how it looks, then if I put some money and some love into it, and I bring a tenant to backfill the former Toys R Us, and I bring a better tenant than Bed Bath that's suffering, then things will probably get better. At least that's the plan. And if the demographics are there, traffic's there, you get a sense of feeling after doing it for a long time. So then I would go after that, I would make a tenant hit list. I'd say, okay, well, I think I can backfill this Toys R Us and Bed Bath. who are the tenants in the area that are potentially able to relocate, or who are some tenants in the area that are missing. So when you put that list together, if you only can count like 4 or 5 tenants on your hand, it's probably not likely you're going to land that tenant. And you also need to understand the backstory of the property. Has that prior owner tried leasing it? What's their financial situation like? So all these questions I have in a hit list for myself. So when I put the list together, it was like 50 tenants. I'm like, shit, one of these is going to hit. And right out the gate, we relocated Home Goods, which is one of the TJ Maxx company's brands. And Skechers followed Home Goods. And then for Bed Bath, we brought in Ross. So it went from the center that was faltering to having the biggest, most famous expanding brands in the country now, and bought that deal for $50 million, and I'm listing it for $87 million 18 months later. So it's having that curated plan together and the well thought out plan of, hey, not, I think I can do this because I'm Robert Rivani, but hey, I've talked to tenants, I've gotten my homework done, I've gotten my research done, I've got the tenants I've spoken to about potentially being interested, and going into it with a really strong, powerful notion that this can get done.
So when you say numbers like 50 million, 80 million, most people can't wrap their head around $1 million. Like most people, they strive to buy a $500,000 house to fix up.
Right.
So how did it actually get to a point to where you were able to do that? Like what was your first deal like?
Yeah.
And then the second deal and third deal, like how did those numbers expand like that?
So great question. So the first deal that I bought from this property, so I always mentioned I 1031 exchange, which I always take my gains on to the next deal. So it was the first deal I bought was a property in Texas, in Pearland, Texas. It was a bank foreclosure. This was like 8 years ago, something along those lines, 9 years ago. And it was a bank REO property. You had to put $700,000 down. And by then I had already started making some money from prior shopping centers. So I brought fresh capital, $700,000 to this deal. And the bank wanted it off their books. Back in the day, during the big Great Recession, banks were like, hey, just take this off our books. It's downgrading our bank quality. We need these out of our hands. So I said, okay, I can't afford a $3.7 million property. I've got $700,000. If you guys will float me the $3 million, then I can buy it. And I said, but I also, and this is really important, I also cannot afford that once I land a tenant to pay for their tenant improvement allowance, to pay the brokerage commissions, and I need some money in reserves. So they said, okay, Robert, we'll give you what we call good news money. If you sign tenants, if you bring in new income and we can prove that and we can confirm the leases and greenlight the tenant, we will fund all that for you. So I said, okay, well, I have to put $700,000 down and I really got to do a really good job leasing. I took my beautiful loving ass to Pearland, Texas, and I got a nice Black Lion outfit on at the time. And I knocked on every single door in that entire market to every single tenant and said, I've got a space here for lease. I can give you 12 months free rent, because I knew in the back of my mind, I already had put away 12 months of my reserves with them. And I'll pay for your relocation costs because I have the tenant improvement allowance coming from the bank. So for me, it was like I'm playing with the house's money. It's like, great. If it goes sideways, great. Take the property back. If it doesn't, it was successful. And back then, since there's always times where you pick up properties in the right market, right? Where if tenants were signing at a very hot market, the rents are above market. And then when you're buying at these great recession points, the rents are a lot lower. I can afford to give a tenant a lot lower rent because my basis for the property is 1/3 of what somebody else's was when they bought at the top of the market. So I was giving these tenants 50% off of what they were used to paying. I was paying for the relocation costs. It was a win-win for both of us. So I filled up that property, I think, in less than 18 months because of this leasing plan I put together, and I sold that property for $10.5 million 2 years after that.
Crushed it. So
killed it.
So with that other $6.5 million, what did you?
I did the same thing, rinse and repeat. I found another property in Arizona that I went out and bought. I bought another property up here in North Palm Beach, was a deal that I sold for $37 million that I bought for 14. So I just did that same rinse and repeat kind of game plan with lenders and game plan for leasing.
So you just scaled up basically from smaller deals. You did one deal like in the mid threes, and then after that it was 8-figure deals?
The first deal I ever did was actually a deal that I bought for $600,000. That was like my first original deal in Atlanta. And I say that the locations because a lot of people get pigeonholed into only investing in their neighborhood or finding somewhere that's within an hour driving distance. If you're trying to make real money, at least starting out, you have to find areas that are more depressed, that are more affected, so back in the day, I bought this property in Southwest Atlanta. It was a $600,000 property. It was the same kind of thing. Bank was like, I'm dying. I need to get rid of this. No one wants to buy it. It was beat up. It was mid-construction, so you still need to finish the building. And I said the same thing to him. I've got $150,000. I can lease this thing up. I need to put some money into the property. If I sign tenants, will you help me? And they agreed because, again, to them, they're getting the property off their books. They have someone that can go in and lease it. It's not like a bank can go and lease properties.
Yeah.
And like, what do I have to lose at that point? At least I'm getting 150 grand out of this guy. And I sold that property for 2.1 million 2 years later. That was like my big aha moment where I'm like, if I can turn 150 grand into almost $1.5 million profit, this is the business I need to be in.
So it's interesting that you would choose that specific segment because most people, all they think about is multifamily.
Right.
And you have no, I talked to you before we even started filming. You're like, I'm not interested in multifamily. How did you know this niche was going to be most profitable and probably the easiest for you to scale?
Yeah, I did not think it was going to be the most profitable. Honestly, I was in property management before that. And I just learned a lot about, retail shopping centers. So it was what I was used to. There was a funny thing, like most of the landlords, at least where I was, were like older Persian men in the multifamily in LA. And they're like, we just hold properties for 50 years. And if we go up double in 50 years, we're happy. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm trying to make money. Like, that's not my plan. And for me, just shopping centers, again, it was more familiar because I was in property management. I knew it, but for me, though, it just seemed like there was a lot more expansion opportunities all throughout the nation. And it was less of a competition pool. Like, everybody's like, I want to flip a home, or I want to flip a 4-unit or a 6-unit or an 8-unit. Like, for me, it's like, nobody really does shopping centers. And I still, to this day, you don't have like singular figures doing shopping centers.
Yeah, I don't know anyone on social media.
Yeah, nobody in social media does. That's great. And I love it. And that's why I don't have a course, because I don't want competition. I don't need anybody to bug me about it. And it's great because it's a lot more difficult entry. There's so much more you need to learn in commercial real estate. Environmental issues, CC&Rs of neighboring properties, how the permitting process is, commercial lease negotiations. It's a completely different ballgame.
So what do you think is, obviously we know some major driving factors for South Florida for the last few years. What do you think is going to maintain this chokehold that basically Florida has on the country? Like, everybody wants to be here. Businesses want to come here. Do you think it's going to maintain?
I think as long as they continue to vote and continue to keep in line the things that made Florida great, they'll be fine. But if all these people that have moved here try to change it to what they want and they tilt it the other way, then you're just going to have the same thing all over again. So I think as long as Florida stays within the lines of what made Florida great and politicians don't try to swing this another way or get too far to the right or too far to the left, I think this will be a safe haven that continues.
Do you think hospitality is more recession-proof? Or do you think it is more susceptible to swings in the market? So
I think hospitality has different levels to it, right? You have the mom and pop 1,000 square foot restaurant that could be considered hospitality, where you have these 10,000 square foot restaurant concepts that do 25, 30 million in sales.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is prone to what's about to come. I think everybody's going to get affected. But I think whenever you have restaurant businesses that are based on liquor sales and sashimi that's selling for $35 with 40% margins, you have a lot more leeway to be successful. So I think, especially in South Florida, where it's not such a big market, like if you go to LA, there's restaurants in downtown, West Hollywood, Santa Monica, it's huge. Everywhere. The South Florida hospitality scene, at least for the big guys, is not that big. You got Brickell, you got Design District, you got Edgewater, you got Miami Beach, and that's pretty much it. So just due to the fact of how much space availability there is and how you're confined by all the water on all sides, I think it's definitely here to stay, and I think it will continue to flourish. Yeah, my buddy bought a place in Miami Beach, and I'm like, oh, we should meet for dinner in Brickell. He's like, let's just do Miami Beach. I can't cross the bridge. Yeah. And like, a lot of people are like that. They're like, it's crazy. I'm in that one area. Yeah. I want to stay here. I'm going to spend money here. 2-3 years ago was not like that. Like, you can get from the beach to Brickell in 10, 15 minutes. Now that the traffic's 45 minutes, you're like, nah, because I live here on the beach. Yeah. And I own a bunch of restaurants in Brickell. I'm like, nah, I don't want to go there. It's a pain in the butt. I don't want to deal with the traffic in and out. And it's a problem. But you're starting to see now Miami as a whole is starting to get segmented, where people are like, oh, I'm only a Brickell person. Oh, I'm only a Miami Beach person. Oh, I'm only in Edgewater. Now it's like, oh my God, I'm only in downtown and I really don't want to leave. So I think that's going to continue. Do you think that it makes it easier for you as a real estate investor to select the right tenants, because you're like, okay, I already know who's going to want to be in this market, or who wants to kind of spread to Brickell or to Edgewater or wherever? Yeah, I mean, at this point, just because of how many deals I've done, pretty much everyone comes to me as like, Robert, what's the best spot to go to? What spot do you have available? Because people think it's easy. Like, you just buy a property and then tenants are just running through the door. Like, the amount of permitting process and rules and regulations and red tape you have to go through to get these restaurants approved is an absolute nightmare. And you need to have a developer that can figure all these things out before you sign a tenant. If not, the tenant will fail. Like, hey, is there proper valet in the front of the space? Are your hours of operation okay? Are you allowed to set music up at certain times? Like, there's people just think, oh, I have a space, I sign a lease with a big name brand tenant, and it's easy. It's very far from that.
How long does it normally take? Like, let's say, for example, you find a really good deal for you to actually get to a point to where, of course, there's going to be certain deals where you're going to put more work into it. But how long does it actually take for you to do all your research, due diligence, find the tenant, and kind of get to a place to where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel?
It's crazy. I kind of set up a competitive market for myself in this hospitality scene because everybody's been seeing like, oh, Robert bought this property, he's leased it up so quickly. So this last SLS deal that I just bought, I had to do a 3-day due diligence. It was a $10 million deal. I literally had 3 days to make all my decisions, and I had like 2 or 3 weeks after to closing cash. I couldn't even get debt on it when I bought it. So for me, I now have to move really quickly, and that's why a lot of people like selling to me because there's no bullshit involved. It's like, all right, if Robert's coming in this deal, he's going to buy it, he's going to close it. But now I'm pretty confident with anything I buy. I already have a Rolodex of tenants that have been looking in the market that want to get spaces leased. But even from that point, it usually takes a tenant from the time a lease is signed, or let's just say a time from when I introduce them to the property until they're open, 18 months. So it's practically like building a building from scratch. Yeah. It's not like though you sign a lease and they're open in 2-3 months after that. So it's an 18-month process from start to finish. And this is the worst part about the hospitality industry. Most lenders have that notion of, oh, hospitality is risky, I don't want to touch it. So your lending terms are not nearly as great as shopping centers. And also your carry cost is through the roof. You only have one tenant paying your mortgage for all intents and purposes. And you have the high property tax, you have association dues because it's part of a condo unit. So you're running almost an 8 to 10% loss per year just to carry this thing. So it's a very risky business, but if you do it right, it's definitely profitable.
What was your worst deal?
I've never had a worse deal. I've never lost a penny on a single deal ever in my career.
Huh.
Not one time.
Like a lot of people will, they have some really big wins and then they have some, learning lessons. Did you just have good mentors? Like, how did you?
I never had a mentor. I'd say the only deal I ever struggled on was a shopping center I built in Vista, California that, I didn't realize the site. It was a vacant land site. I owned the shopping center next door. I bought this land site because I knew that Sprouts grocery store wanted to take it. Yeah. And I was super excited. And the deal was a thin margin already. It was like be into the deal for like 10 million, 11 million bucks and sell it for 14, 15 after 3 years. So to me, that's a pretty
extremely, yeah.
It's
you got carrying cost.
Yeah, it's a very thin margin.
Yeah.
What my dumbass didn't realize is when they were starting to excavate that it was on Indian burial ground. And that's one of the biggest learning mistakes of like property getting proper soil reports, this, that, the other. Because I would have never thought Indian burial ground in San Diego. So that ended up costing me like $2.5 million to do. So I ended up squeaking out, I think, like a $200,000 gain on a $13 million investment. My shopping center made $15 million on next door, so I benefited that way. But on that project, I just tied up a lot of time, capital, money, 2 years of construction. It was an absolute nightmare, but it was a big learning lesson. In terms of mentors, like you said, there's not really anybody on social media that you can turn to that's your mentor for commercial real estate. You kind of have to go with it. And that's what I did. And I think the biggest thing for me was starting out small. A lot of people get super excited about like, well, if I did a 2-unit, I could do a 200 unit. No. Like, I don't know, maybe it's different in multifamily, but a small neighborhood shopping center compared to a power center, which is a big, large one, would be
block to block.
2 completely different beasts.
Yeah.
So I think just start small, take your growing pains, learn step by step, property by property, and then get to the big boys. But it's a process. It took me 10 years. I didn't just jump into it.
So what do you like when you find a deal and you're like, okay, this checks all the boxes, is going to work? What's your hold time? You say you like the 1031 and you want to move into bigger and bigger deals, right? But at a certain point, you're going to have all the prime markets, all the places you want to be. So what do you do at that point?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's certain properties, and I haven't gotten there yet because I don't want to say anything's untouchable. There's a certain point where your properties are just, you own them for pride. Yeah. And I think the only time you get to that is when your net worth is like, I just don't give a shit about money, and you're doing projects out of pride more than anything. Yeah. And that's what a lot of the projects I'm doing here in South Florida are just pride projects, like changing the hospitality scene of all of South Florida, the biggest restaurateurs across the world, is something I'm proud of. It's something I want to bring to the city. But for shopping centers, it's like, hey, I go off like an IRR. If I can't double my equity in 2 to 3 years, I'm probably not going to touch the deals. I'd rather go for more of the home runs at this point than try to squeak out the 10, 15% returns, because it just doesn't leave you margin. There's too much dysfunction that can go on in a 2-year hold period. That's like, if you're trying to go to that thin of a margin and things turn sideways, you're just handing the keys back. So I'd rather be patient, go for the more home runs than just to do as many deals as possible. And I think that's a big mistake for people. It's like, I need to do volume. I need to close something every single week, every single 2 weeks. It's like, volume to a degree, but the numbers need to make sense for me
it'd be
first.
Quality over quantity.
For sure.
Like, you want to do good deals that actually make sense versus a bunch of deals that barely pay you anything.
Yeah, it's brain damage too, right? Like, a lot of people don't appreciate that about real estate. It's a lot of brain damage, and the team that you have to have. Like, For me, the more and more deals I'm doing, that means the more attorneys, the more attorney fees, the more property managers, the this, the that, the other. And my portfolio at one time was 2 million square feet of property, and I think now it's down to 500,000 square feet. And it's not because I've lost money, it's because I've consolidated. I've focused more on best bang for your buck than just owning everything across the nation and having operational nightmares up the wazoo, especially when you have out-of-state properties.
And do you still have out-of-state properties now?
I still do.
Besides the one in New Jersey?
I still do.
And what does that team look like? Do you mainly run it like remote, to where you have a couple people on the ground, you have like management that
we have
oversees everybody?
Yeah, we have third-party property management on the ground, and then internally we have asset managers and property managers that watch those people. So a lot of people are like, well, I could buy a property out of state and then I could just manage it. No. Like, you still need to have managers watching your managers, because these managers don't give a shit about your property. They're managing 100 properties. Why would they care about yours more than the next 99? So running a proper, efficient management team is extremely important, but the most important is running a very efficient construction team. Because if you're getting these projects done, or you're trying to rebuild exteriors or rebuild tenant interiors, if you can't get these spaces built on a timely manner, you're not getting your rent, because they can't pay you rent because they're not open. If it takes too long to build, then you can't sell the property, so that's affecting your IRR and your rate of return on how long that project takes. So construction team and design is of utmost importance to get that out the gate before you even buy a property, because if that takes too long, that affects every aspect of your investment.
Do you travel like pretty constantly to all these different markets to just verify everything is going as planned?
I used to. When I was much younger, I used to. This $50 million property in New Jersey I mentioned to you, I didn't even go see it before I bought it. I bought a $50 million property during, I didn't even bother going and seeing it. Google Maps and Google Earth and demographics did all the homework I needed.
Did you have somebody on the ground that kind of gave you the thumbs up as well? Or did you go strictly off tech?
No. Property condition report showed me all the photos of the asset. Google Earth showed me the exterior. Income and expense we review in-house. And again, it's rinse and repeat for me. I don't get emotional over deals. As long as it checks the boxes, as long as the demographics checks, the ingress, egress to the property, the tenancies, the sales, it's just black and white for me. It's not really an emotional feeling.
Is there any other investment or investment class that is exciting to you outside of hospitality right now?
I've been quickly looking, single-family luxury homes. Actually, I'm redeveloping, we're listing on the market, I think next week actually. It's a $45 million house in Malibu. So I did single-family homes as a dare. My friend, we always have our wars, commercial versus residential. It's like, you can't do residential. Commercial's so easy. I'm like, okay, watch me. And I bought this $20 million house in Carbon Beach. I'm in the process of redeveloping it and remodeling and listing it at the end of the year. So I like the single-family market for the ultra luxury, because people will just stroke a check and they don't really care about comps as much. And if they like something and they'll buy it. So I've been looking into that, dabbling into that. And now I'm starting to look into the office market, because I think if you can find an office building in the right market that's not solely dependent upon office and has a luxury hospitality component to it, or like a membership component to it, I think that could potentially be the grounds for great success and great profitability, because you're being able to get such a deep discount on these assets. But again, only in the right areas.
Yeah. When you say the right areas, do you like areas that are obviously more in terms of like Florida type of political stance, where everything's more open, lower tax base, they're
for sure.
attracting higher quality businesses?
I think the thing for me is, if there's a city that allows rampant crime and allows people to thieve and steal with no consequence, I'm not investing there.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense, because retailers can't survive. And people, like, if you're seeing your local 7-Eleven or your Louis Vuitton getting broken into, are you going to feel comfortable wanting to walk to work if you're in a downtown CBD?
No.
Absolutely not. Like, it's got to have a lot of components. Like, is it somewhere people are higher income because they can afford higher office rental rates? Is there a big population growth going into the area? Is it around, like, for example, Miami Beach office? Like, is it around the beach? Is someone gonna be excited to come to work? Is it near like Lincoln Road? Does it have all these aspects that like make it exciting to go to work? Does it have valet? Is it convenient? Like, that's where I think office is heading towards, where it's a big convenience factor versus it's like, oh, I have to go to the office, especially with all this remote work going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what we've seen a lot over the last couple of years, a lot of businesses expanding nationally or worldwide. They're going to Europe, they're going to different places around the world and bringing headquarters and recruiting talent and doing things like that. Mm-hmm. And travel has definitely picked up a lot.
For sure.
Have you thought about hospitality in some of these markets where a lot of people are now spending a lot more time?
I mean, the next phase for Blackline hopefully will be a large format, 100 key, 200 key hotel on the beach or in Brickell. So that's, I think, where we're progressing more, is bringing, because right now I'm adding tremendous value for the people that own above me in these big condo developments by bringing these big name restaurants. I'm sitting here scratching my head like, how much is SLS benefiting from Bad Bunny and David Grutman doing the restaurant they did on the ground floor?
Yeah.
A lot. The room rates have gone up. They've never been busier, and it's like, why am I allowing them to get the benefit of all this? They're not paying me anything. They're not doing anything for me. So why don't I be the one that develops that high rise or that building, and then bring all the restaurants into it and make it the spot to be?
Yeah, I mean, if they're getting a 15-20% bump on rents on a 200 key or 250 key building, like they're making tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars off of. Yeah,
it's huge. Like this other SLS property that we bought, that restaurant's been empty for 4 years. For 4 years, and we signed Rosa Negra, which is one of the largest hospitality brands out of Mexico, and they're expecting to do tens and tens of millions of dollars in sales there. Like imagine the amount of foot traffic and celebrities that are going to come to this property now that otherwise has been dead for 4 or 5 years, but they're getting the benefit of that, not me.
Would you ever partner up with some of these chains and be like, look, this is what I can bring to this is my track record, this is what I've done before, this is how much revenue I've helped increase in terms of like room rents, to where they'd bring some risk to the table?
Yeah, for sure. That's something that, but again, you need to have the right equity stack. So for me, it's like building in phases, right? Building blocks, shopping centers, power centers, high-end hospitality, then it'll be hotels or the next game plan. So that's definitely the next step.
What do you think about, so this commercial real estate situation? They say that $1 trillion has to be refied in the next year, and $2.7 trillion has to be refied inside from now until 2027.
Right.
Which is basically 1 in 10 properties in America.
Right.
Which is like a massive, massive figure. So because of that, are you taking, what type of approach would you suggest someone to take with no experience, and what type of approach are you taking based on some of these other opportunities?
I mean, for me, again, it's just waiting on the sidelines, being very careful, because you never know when that next big shoe is going to drop. Like the Fed keeps raising rates. Like when is this shit going to end? Like
a lot of people thought it was going to end in January.
So did I.
Yeah,
I thought it was going to end, but they're raising it again, and they're talking about raising it again.
September.
So if they keep raising it, then that for me, that just keeps pushing me being more and more patient. I know it's tough, right? Like everyone's sitting at home, like I got cash to burn. I want to buy something, but it's like, got to be patient. So again, just planning out what the next couple steps are. There's been a trick that I've been pondering around, where it's like selling a property to somebody a little bit below what I think the market value is, but let them give me 6 months of time to close that deal.
Yeah.
So that way I can have that money ready to go. So if I find that 1031 exchange, then I have the equity ready to go into the next deal. So I'm taking a little bit of a hit on the sale, but I'm going to make it on the purchase.
Yeah, you position yourself for the upside.
Right, position yourself for the upside. So that's kind of the plan I've been taking. Like I said, lines of credits. To me, lines of credits are like the most beautiful thing, because you're not burning the money, you're not paying interest on it. Banks don't usually like giving it, but you can force their hand sometimes if you have a decent relationship. So if anytime someone's struggling and like my note's coming due in 30 days, I have nothing, I have no options, I'm like, okay, if they're asking 15 million, I got 8-9 million cash. Do you want it or not? If not, you're handing the keys back to the bank. Your choice. Yeah. So it's those kinds of situations where unfortunately you're gonna have to take advantage of some people that over leverage and did other things. For first time people right now, and I know real estate's become this really big boom of like, I want to get in the real estate business. Yeah. And I only have 50 grand, 100 grand. I always tell people, get together with your friends, get together with a pool of people or co-investors or people you meet at these conferences, because 50 grand, 100 grand in commercial real estate retail,
you're doing nothing.
You're doing nothing. You're just wasting your time.
You need like a $500,000, $1 million to do like a decent deal.
If even that, and those deals are few and far between, and they're not really something you want to touch because they're just that price point. No one, like the good entry point deal for right now is probably say is $1 million. And a lot of people on the resi side are used to like 75, 80% financing. In commercial, that thing's tightened up quite a bit. You're like at 60, 65%. But your pops are bigger. Your equity pops are bigger if you can put a good game plan together. So I'd say get in groups with people. You're not gonna be able to afford a team out the gate. Like for me, I'll do my own bookkeeping when I first bought properties. I'll do my own leasing. So if you're not capable of doing some of those things, then find some friends or people that have like good specialties. Like one person may be a great salesman. You may be the guy knocking on doors and attracting tenants, while the other guy's really shy and wants to be a bookkeeper and just control the numbers and make sure the property's running efficiently. So finding a great team and pulling money together would be my number one suggestion.
Got it. What do you think about the e-commerce space in the coming few years? Do you think it's going to impact certain markets more than others?
I think the e-commerce space and robots are about to kick some serious ass. Yeah. I mean, between AI and how things can be delivered via drone or robot or the little carts that are running around the street. I think we're in for a very ugly surprise to come up.
Yeah. Well, what I think is going to happen, and I'm curious as to what you think. I think there's going to be certain markets in America that are going to explode. Even like a lot of people think that, they're already popular now, but the people that have money are going to want to go to those markets even more, and everyone else is going to be forced to live in the other markets. And drones are going to be much more popular there, and there's going to be other.
Yeah, I mean, look at where South Carolina, Tennessee, Atlanta were 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody gave a
No
crap
one wanted
about
to be
those
there.
tertiary markets, secondary markets. They weren't popular, but now they're becoming the most popular because of cost of living. Like, it's crazy. Like I went to Texas for the first time when I bought that property, and I saw this house. It's like a 6,000 square foot house, half acre lot. And I'm like, this must be like $3-4 million, like 400 grand. I'm like, what? What are you talking about 400 grand? And it's like when people get a taste of that and they're living in freezing ass Chicago, paying $3 grand for a shoebox per month, and like, why am I living like this?
Yeah.
Why am I not going to go enjoy a half acre lot with my family and live in a nice climate? And it's like, that's where I think you're going to start to see that major change. And you're starting to see that already, especially from people from the Midwest and from the West Coast, and especially the Northwest now. Like everyone's just sick of all the crap that's going on there in Oregon and Washington and everything, and people are starting to leave. So I think that continues.
Yeah. So what do you like? You've been, I saw you, I think, on The Real Deal originally. Your personal brand's been picking up. And how's that personal brand helped you in terms of finding deals and monetizing it? And where do you see, Black Lion going, and what's your plan there?
Yeah. So I didn't have a social media account up until a public one up until like 18 months ago. And I never really thought that personal brand, again, in commercial real estate, that where it was never done online, no one cared about it, was important. And the whole beard and mohawk happened by chance during COVID, and my wife was doing my hair and it became a thing. And then slowly after a while, everyone's like, hey, you start to look like your logo, like the Black Lion, you kind of look alike, and just by chance.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, just by chance happened. And then for the commercial real estate scene, for shopping centers, it really wasn't still that big of an impact. People just saw me on Real Deal a lot. Oh, this guy's a shaker and mover. He's buying a lot of deals. But in the hospitality scene, it became a really big deal because most people in hospitality like to deal with the individual. They don't like to deal with the corporation. They're like, well, if Rob, thinks this is a good property and he can get all the bells and whistles done for me, and if someone from like Dubai comes over, doesn't really understand local, laws and ordinances and permitting process, like I come in and help them with that. And being on social media is like your social passport. So when I'm in Dubai or I'm in London or I'm in wherever in the world, they look you up on social media. Oh, what has he done? Who are the brands he's done deals with? It gives you that verification that otherwise, like, here's my business card. That shit doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like if you look in like the 90s and early 2000s, Trump was licensing, Trump everywhere.
Right.
Because of that brand. And he was like the only one to do it.
Right.
But now with social media, if you have that brand and people want to enter a new market and they're like, well, I don't know the people, I don't know what to do, but I have cash. You're going to go with someone that knows what they're doing, that has a brand, and you're like, hey, I can license with this guy, or I can partner with this guy.
And that brand also is like a verification of, especially if you've seen, like people have seen my projects, like I know it's going to be a luxury or a proper product. I know Robert's name is behind it, and therefore he's not going to let it be a C grade or a B grade asset. It's going to be something done top of the line, and we can trust in that. It's like if you go stay at a Four Seasons or a Ritz-Carlton, there's a certain level of luxury and experience and management that you're expecting when you're staying there. And I think that's where I'm trying to take the brand, that every time you're, hopefully staying at a Black Lion property, whether that's a hotel or shopping at a shopping center or dining at one of our hospitality venues, that it is a proper tenant in there, a proper brand, a proper experience.
Was that always your goal with Black Lion, to be the luxury?
No, it was not. It was crazy. It was the shopping centers. I want to be the king of the neighborhood power center shopping centers, but for me, like I said, after COVID, I had to pivot a little bit. I didn't want to put all my eggs into one industry and say, hey, I want to ride and die everything on shopping centers, because just in case robots, Amazon, industrial warehouses, online sales took over, I had a backup plan. So now it's a little bit mixed all over, from shopping centers to power centers to luxury hospitality to single family. So it's a little bit all over. Never know, multifamily maybe next.
Yeah. What advice do you have for somebody that wants to build a personal brand around their business and kind of do something big there?
The number one thing, I know this is very difficult, especially starting out, is just be yourself. Just be yourself. Like, I can't begin to tell you how much backlash I got. Like, oh, this guy's not a professional real estate guy. Look how he dresses. Look how he acts. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, people should love you for who you are, and don't be afraid of being yourself. Now, if you're in a professional setting and you're dealing with people that, upper management, or you're trying to look at a job, keep yourself tailored, keep yourself proper. Don't, be everything you want to be out there. But I think you get to a certain point where people with big personalities appreciate that person for being themselves. And at this point, I'm unapologetically myself.
Do you look for the same when you hire?
That's a great question. When I hire, I look for people that have grit and hunger. Like, coming from, not having a high school diploma or a college degree, I don't just look at, oh, you graduated Stanford, so you're my guy. I look at people's eyes, I talk to them, I'm like, how fucking hungry are you? Like, I want to know, how badly do you want this position? What makes you tick? What makes me believe you're gonna, kill yourself and work here for a couple of years and not just get 3-4 months of education and jump ship? Because having team longevity and having people that like each other and work together, have the same passion and goal is going to make your success 1,000 times better. Like, I hate when people say, well, employees are employees. No, employees run your company. Employees are your partners. Without them, you're fucked. Like, you can't do it. I can't do what I do without my team behind me. So curating the right group of people, which is very difficult, is one of the number one keys to my success.
So you probably get a lot of DMs, people like, hey, I'll work for free, or I want to work for you. When you get somebody that reaches out to you, what is it that communicates that? Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm so focused, and they describe everything that you want, but at the end of the day, they're lazy, most of them.
I mean, I get 1,000 DMs daily of, I'll work for free, I just want to learn, I want to do this. And while I appreciate that and I'm grateful for that, trying to teach somebody something that I'm doing is very difficult. Like, I don't have the time, the team doesn't have really time to train people. But we try to find people that have already had some type of experience in our general arena, and then we just add the block line touch to it. Because so many people are used to doing a corporate structured way, in a corporate structured avenue of commercial real estate, where everything has to be buttoned up to a certain way, a report has to be done a certain way, a remodel has to be done a certain way, versus like what people love about our brand is like, screw it, we're gonna do what we like. We don't care if it's not the norm. That's what makes our company exciting. Like, we did this property, Wynwood Jungle, and we spent $500,000 on fake florals throughout the property and put twinkly lights to make you feel like you're going through a mushroom experience. And people in the like shopping center were like, what are you doing? You can't do that. That's not going to work. Filled up that property in less than 12 months and took the NOI from $300,000 to $2.1 million in less than 18 months.
Crazy.
And just because of the social media impact. And this is something I should stress on too. Social media, especially in high vibrant markets like this, make a huge impact. We have probably 10 to 20 people a day just posting that property because there's artwork all over the walls. I wish you can show them whenever you're doing this video, where you can show like, this became an Instagram moment. People just came here to take photos, but when they're there, they're gonna go to Salty Donut, they're gonna go to a tea place, they're gonna get ramen, they're gonna do poke, they're gonna do a little bit of everything, and it becomes that experience. So experience, shopping and dining has become like the things I'm trying to push the most for most of our developments.
Yeah, because you get billions of views for free.
Billions. Like it's the greatest marketing tool ever.
Yep.
And especially in the local community where you have people that go there all the time, then their friends would be like, where was that beautiful property? I want to go. And then they tell their family, then they tell their family, and then they're repeat customers. And that to me is the future of retail, is making it an experience. It can't just be boilerplate and boring, because why would they come to you versus the 100 other opportunities that they have to go shop and dine at?
Yeah. You have an interesting way of looking at the world. What are your friends like?
The exact opposites of me, to say the least. My friends are very low key, 9 to 5, like to enjoy their families and a normal life, and that's great. I'm just the exact opposite, and most of them still live in Los Angeles.
Huh. So do you have any new friends, or mainly just the childhood friends that you kind of grew up with?
Yeah, no. I mean, the good thing is I've been coming to Miami for 8 years, like I mentioned, so I've already developed a great group of friends here, but it's a very different speed. Like, I always joke with my LA friends, I'm like, you guys are always in bed by 8 o'clock, depressed, you have to take care of your kids. And my Miami friends like, yeah, my kids will be fine with the babysitter. We're drinking till 12 o'clock at night. We're going to enjoy our life. Don't worry about it. It's like, it's that more European, South American type of living than the typical California one.
Cool. Well, Robert, great to connect with you, man.
You as well. I appreciate the time.